This is Morten Reitert from INKISH TV. As some of you may have known or know, we have been quite busy with these all the Skype sessions for some weeks because of the Corona crisis. And today we are actually in South Africa, which is the first time I ever meet anybody from South Africa. So that's really great. And I have the pleasure to talk to she will introduce herself in a second, but I was just about to say that is a really globetrotter because she is out of the UK, she works in the Middle East, and she works in South Africa, and you are a world woman, aren't you, Jean?
Hi there. Well, let's put it this way. I've had fun in my career, living and working across the globe, so it's been a very, very exciting time. Thanks.
So, Jean Lloyd, which is your full name, you have been working with a lot of the vendors in the printing industries, especially with inkjet technology, but you're currently working as an independent consultant. So, how is that?
So, let's put it this way. I've had a very exciting career, and my career has taken me from litho back in '99 when I joined Heidelberg, first time in the industry, moved across when Heidelberg started with digital technology, moved across to that division. I then joined up with Kodak, and with my career at Kodak, took me, I'd say, around the world, very exciting times. And when Inkjet was very new on the market, early stages of Inkjet, I was in a marketing position in Europe, and we had to go around basically educating our direct and indirect internal customers on Inkjet technology. So kind of hands-on from the beginning, which was fantastic. And from there, I was asked to go and set up, let's call it the Inkjet division in London, so responsible for UK Nordics. And I was hands-on. The first Inkjet, one of the first Inkjet beta sites was under my wing. I was responsible for the division. I ran, as I say, the Inkjet as well as the toner division. I had to build an Inkjet team. So we had our beta site, and as everybody knows with beta sites, I think you know what to do and you know what not to do. We had our challenges, but I got to say the experience, you can't put a price tag on that. And thank goodness we eventually had a product that came to market and still extremely successful to this day. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey and hands-on right from the beginning when Inkjet first came out. There were no, carry on.
Yeah, no, I was just curious because as an independent consultant today, your role, is that mainly on the commercial side, or is it more on the technical side? Your role as how you perform your business?
I guess it's where customers need me. I've been in the corporate world most of my life, working for some of the top vendors, which has been absolutely awesome. I then decided it's time to have a career change and get out of the industry. I think I took a break for a couple of weeks before I started getting phone calls from print companies that I had relationships with, who were saying to me, if you're on your own, can you not assist us? We're looking at buying Inkjet, and could you assist us in a consultancy role, advising us what to do, what to look for? And I kind of sat back and realized that I love this industry. And as much as we think it's time for a career change and to start over, those 20 years spent in it would have all been a total waste. And I think because of my knowledge and my experience that I've gained, I almost felt by assisting printers, I was giving back. And I think that was a big thing for me because I could actually help people. I was confident enough and knew enough about Inkjet to be able to, I'd say, confidently advise and recommend. So that's kind of how it started. And once the printer had, let's call it, got the Inkjet, I was then asked to train the salespeople, kind of get them ready to go to market, I guess. With over time, a lot of the vendors started approaching, and a lot of the areas that I was looking after was the developing countries where they didn't have expertise. So a lot of the vendors then approached me and asked if I would assist them and their salespeople, their customers. So I had to be selective, obviously, which vendors, and, there wasn't a conflict of interest. But I started working with a few vendors in the market as well as print companies.
So one of the things that I am trying to figure out, and I'm pretty sure that you can answer this, is so it's not trying to be like a secret, but I was just wondering, when you work where you are a consultant for the PSPs and you at the same time have the relationship with the vendors, obviously you need to get that knowledge and information from somewhere to figure out what is the best solution. I was just wondering, how do you separate that life?
When I'm working for a vendor, I am naturally the vendor, then whoever hires me for that particular project, I work with them and give them advice accordingly. If I'm approached first by the print service provider, I obviously need to turn the vendor down, and I'm working for that print service provider. To try and balance it, and I've got to be very careful because from day one, I don't get involved. When I'm working with vendors, I don't get involved in talking about the actual print technology. So I don't talk about the press that they're trying to push to a customer. To me, all these presses have got a place in the market. It's a marketing tool. So when I'm working with vendors, that's how I look at it. And I approach it very much that way, where I'm, it's what are you going to do with it? What is your strategy? What markets are you going to be focusing on? Where are we going to get volume? So it's a whole different approach. When I work for a printer, I also try not to just say, here's this box and this is what you should go for based on his needs. I give him options, and I give him the good, the bad, and the ugly as much as I can, let's put it that way. The honest opinion on what I find out, and I give him choices, and at least if he makes those choices, I've given him what I know to be factual information based on, let's say, what I know from the market and the contacts that I have, developed over the years. Yeah.
And if you look at, I was just curious about maybe it's a very simple question, but if you look at from PSPs, and let's say that you are a printing company, you never had any inkjet devices in your company portfolio before, and you're going into this market, what is the typical kind of questions you have on these things?
So, to me, you've got to look at this as something totally different to what you're used to. If you were a ink on paper company, which most of the call it printers are, and they're going into this market, depending on the market segment they're going to be focusing on and driving and pushing, they have to have a totally new and different approach. So over the years now, put together a list of, it's probably about 3 pages, and I update regularly and frequently as things in the market change.
So that is a Jean in advance FAQ, basically.
Basically, and if you're going to be looking at Inkjet, these are 3 pages of key factors that you need to be looking at. And as I say, they change probably quite frequently because of the market and what happens in the market. But I think I can confidently say I've been involved in Inkjet where there were no case studies, there were no loads of sites, there weren't all the articles and information that's available now. So I've been hands-on throughout, and I think I know the tricks of the trade. I think I know, what you look out for, what do you need to be careful of, and what you need to put in place to get into this market. And it still amazes me today how many print shops I walk into, and some of them have already made the investment, but they don't have a plan and they don't have a go-to-market strategy. So here's a press, and we've had discussions over the last weeks about printers being the worst marketers, and I love them to bits, but printers do not market themselves well. And I think a lot of them are, we're going to get an inkjet, and they tell everybody, we put it in the magazine. We've got an inkjet press. Great. And they think everybody's going to be running to them, their customers and that, because they've got inkjet. They don't advertise the benefits of what inkjet can do for whatever segment they're focusing on, and those benefits. And when I go into a lot of training, it's kind of the first things I try and speak to salespeople about. And it's like, what are the benefits of the press that you bought? And it's actually quite scary how many of them can't actually give you the benefits, because they'll tell you about speeds and feeds.
But that honestly, sorry to interrupt. Yeah, sorry to interrupt. But that is, I think that is a legacy problem, right? Because if you look at, I attended a few sales meetings from that. I think I was one with Koenig and Bauer, and I have also obviously been with Xerox since I worked there. It was, the demand from the printing companies were often like, okay, how fast is it? How beautiful are the colors, and how smooth is the surface? And that. So I mean, you can learn an old dog new tricks, right? But it takes a lot of time. Yeah. So what should the measures be? How should they judge it else? Differently, because they have never been in a situation where you look at the customer perspective. You always looked at, okay, how efficient is this press, right? Because that has been the competitive advantage, right?
Exactly. I think, as I say, when he's putting a business plan together, if I'm advising and I give them a template here's a template for a business plan. One of the things in there is your go-to-market message, and how are you going to let everybody know what you have? And you might not have the internal staff to be able to get the market and the industry excited, but I then find I've got a lot of third-party companies that I work with that will help with that messaging and getting it out there and getting it on social media and, getting that right message to market of the benefits of what have I actually just bought. I do a lot of that in my training. And it's important to educate the people internally as well as externally, because they're the ones that are going to go out there and market this expensive beast that they've just bought.
But Jean, I think that is, of course, everything you say is totally fair, and I think it's also correct what you're saying. But I also think to some extent that shooting at the PSPs is one thing. I think it's also maybe worth shooting a little bit on the vendor side, because how do they sell these machines? Often you see that, okay, you have this X press that produces 100 sheets per hour with the capacity that you have right now and the order volume. If you get this press, you can do it in half time, leveraging a lot of more work, so you can make more money on it. So the measures that you're talking about right now, isn't that also something that the vendors, at least to some extent, are guilty in?
100%. And I think most vendors actually do have business development consultants that should go out there and, let's call it, educate customers and salespeople. But, when things get cut, it's normally the business development that, can't go flying, or because they're in, different geographies, or because of time constraints, they don't get out there. And I think when I speak to a lot of vendors, and again, I've got relationships with all vendors, a lot of those salespeople, not everybody gets it. And, they're the ones that are kind of got to get the message across. And that part of it is sometimes, a lot of time it's totally ignored. It's obviously just about getting the sale and assuming that the printer's got that relationship with their customers. So, they're going to be getting the business. But it's not that easy when you start talking about inkjet and the benefits of it. And I think that's also, the presses aren't being, a lot of times, not all, because I know some sites that could use a second or a third press, but the presses don't get utilized to their full potential. And it's kind of stick to what you know, because dipping your toe in the water and starting to look at data and all kinds of other things are scary because you don't have the knowledge. And I think, a lot of the salespeople that are at, let's call it at the printer salespeople, those guys are in comfort zones. They've been selling ink on paper forever. They've got relationships. Now you start talking to them about all these wonderful things inkjet can do. You start talking to them about data. You start talking to them about VDP and all these scary words. And they just going, I don't want to get involved in this. I'm retiring in 5 years. This is something that is a scary subject with these guys. And I honestly believe, and I've trained hundreds of people, and I can tell you within hours, you can almost sit there identifying who's actually going to get it and who's not. I'm not saying people are untrainable, but it's a comfort zone that you're in. And sometimes you've got to be realistic, and you've got to appreciate that those salespeople that have been selling ink on paper have got strong relationships. And you need to look at possibly finding, call it an Inkjet champion, that can talk the talk to brand owners, that can talk the talk to marketeers, because there's all these buzzwords. You need to understand, what the Direct Marketing Association is pushing. You need to, there's loads that you need to understand. And I think realistically, find an Inkjet champion that can go out with these salespeople. But then again, it starts boiling down to commission and money, and people stay in those comfort zones because it's a quick buck, and they can earn money there. When you start talking all this other stuff and getting lost, and if you don't know what you're talking about, you're not going to get customers aboard. So when you are putting your business plan together, you need to look at change management, and you need to understand that internal resistance is going to exist if you like it or not.
Before we move on, because you are one of the few persons I know that talk more than me, which says quite a lot. No, I'm
passionate about this business.
Because you mentioned one thing that is particular of interest to me, because you mentioned commissions as part of, I wouldn't say the problem, because commissions are made to make an incentive for people to, do something specifically, right? And I think that if you look at, for example, when you say all these words about like variable data and mass customization and personalization and all the words where you see the 5-year retirement plan, they are already. I was just thinking that maybe one of the issues also, and that doesn't relate to the commissions I want to talk about in a second, but it relates a little bit to the fact that that if you look at the digital print vendors, from when it was black and white sheet to it was roll-based sheet to it was color sheet to it was color toner to inkjet, it's always been the same kind of metrics. Always like use that. Yeah, then you can make personalized, individualized print, and that is the new black. No, I was just saying that maybe one of the issues is that if you look at the past, most printers have actually found out that all the buzzwords that you're talking about, they didn't pay the bills, because basically digital was used for short runs. So it just replaced all offset printing machines to be more financially viable to do short runs, rather than having all these things that requires a lot of education from salespeople. It requires a lot of data handling and a lot of skills that a lot of printing companies don't have. So don't you think, as a kind of leading question, but don't you think that it's also, to be fair, that the print vendors, they have also been telling the same story without really delivering on it?
Honestly, has it moved on? No. And I think, again, from both sides, people stick to their comfort zones. And, when you're putting together the due diligence of justifying an inkjet investment, you'd probably find a lot of vendors kind of stick to what the printer is not going to scare the printer. So short run work, you can move those volumes across. And, a lot of that comes into a conversation where a lot of vendors are scared to bring that up because they don't want to scare the printer away. And I've seen quite a bit of that. But, to me, I look at it and I go, but there's so many other opportunities beside what he's been doing traditionally. But it almost becomes, well, then we need to start introducing different types of software. Then we need to introduce X, Y, Z. And you're looking at delaying a sales cycle. As it is, if you're going to be investing in Inkjet, it's a long sales cycle.
And then we get back to the commission side, right? So everybody is looking for the short-term gain, right? The printers, they want to sell print as they have done always, because that is easier than trying to invent something new, because they can lose the customers. The vendors, the salespeople from vendors, they're looking for the short-term gain, how to sell this machine, because they are on a strict budget, and they may also be on a strict commission, right?
Absolutely. Look, everybody's on a commission and everybody wants to drop a box. Doesn't matter which way you look at it. They want to put a box down. So a print, let's call it a vendor, will sit with a printer and they'll have a list of things to go through. And to justify your investment, you need to make sure that you've got volume. And, it's just easy to run around a print shop and go, you can move this, you can bring that here, you can bring that there, because you want to try and close that sale and try and avoid all those delays. So, commission becomes a whole nother topic of... you're sort of stepping on a lot of toes in that, because all the vendors are going to say, no, our guys know that they need to do X, Y, Z. In reality, does that happen out there? I think anything to avoid delay sales cycles comes into play. And there are vendors that play the game and they do it properly. But, I'm just saying, on average, I've been to a lot of sites where I think the groundwork could have been... There could have been a lot more groundwork done before you kind of get that sale, and to the detriment of the printer.
If we look from that perspective, do you think that when the day is over, that if more people were playing by the books and being more honest about how things moves around, also placing volume from, let's say, it could be from offset to inkjet or from toner to inkjet, do you think that would actually leverage potentially larger sales when it comes to the number of units?
I think it would help, let's call it the reality of what happens on site, and to get volume on site. There's lots happens in the pre-sale side of things, and from getting print samples sent out, a vendor wants to see what my job looks like on that particular press, so they send that out. There needs to be a criteria around that. And, what paper was it printed on? What profiles were used? And important, what speed was that press running to get that kind of quality? One of the things I got taught in the early days was paper. Inkjet is all about paper. And I have to say, as people are finding out now, it is all about paper. When you go to the trade shows, you go to a showroom, you get the best samples. In reality, that paper is just far too expensive for a printer to print on, and it doesn't justify his investment. So there has to be a tick box of things that vendors are making sure they're covering, and then the printer needs to make sure that he's got all of those answers, because he's going to be sitting with a press that, to justify it, has to have 20 million volume, and all of a sudden he's only got 5 million. So I think there could be a lot more work done on both sides of the fence. To be fair, I think I don't think vendors go out there wanting a press that isn't going to be printing and have volume, but the inkjet is still very new in a lot of developing countries as well. So that knowledge and expertise isn't there yet. Guys are selling something and they don't actually know what to advise printers of, and maybe sometimes they don't want to, but there has to be a tick box of questions on both sides.
Well, that is a subject on its own, I guess. One of the things that I would like to invite you for, it's because this session is over now, because we have to keep attention for what's important right now. And I think that now we have established quite a few things in this conversation. So I am therefore inviting you to have a conversation with me in maybe a couple of weeks, where we talk specifically about commissions and moving volumes between divisions within a company. Is that something that I can ask you to participate in?
Absolutely. I think that's one of my favorite subjects, because you see the challenges out in the markets and what happens in reality. So definitely, yes.
Before we close the session here, do you think that and maybe that is a little tough question to put in a very short answer, but do you think that sometimes printers may end up in situations where they are kind of strong-armed into decisions by vendors because of this divisional that makes it difficult for them to make the right choices from a commercial perspective?
So I think, one of the big things is when a company is looking at investing in Inkjet, the whole company is excited about this because it does put your company on a map. And, everybody looks at this and goes, the reality is if we got an Inkjet press, our customers, the market, everyone's going to be so impressed with us. And everybody assumes they're going to just be getting all this new work, which they could because they're getting an Inkjet. The harsh realities of things that happen internally once that press arrives becomes a whole nother discussion. And we've touched on this previously, yourself and I, but so to the due diligence of, you're building your business case for Inkjet is finding the volume in all divisions. And everybody's open for you to come and look at. If you're going into a publishing company that print for publishers, they'll give you, and, all those different divisions will tell you, how much volume they've got. And so when you're building your business case, it's like, what? We've got 30 million or 20 million. We've got enough to justify, or we've got 10 million, depending which press you buy. We've got enough to justify this kind of investment. When that press gets installed and a couple of months later while it's running, that volume needs to come from all those different divisions where everybody agreed when they were building the business case. But then the whole commission story comes into play, and I'm probably touching on the future topic, but you find all those divisions then that are losing those volumes and have to give those volumes away are going, hang on a second, we've got a budget and we've got a target and that's set for the year. And all of a sudden, all the short run work has to go to that particular division. My commission, my performance bonus, my salespeople are throwing their toys out the cot because they've got to give that over to another division. And the harsh reality is you're going to start finding a lot of internal resistance. And, the Inkjet divisions, the new division, let's call it, within that organization, and they're going to start soon enough swimming upstream within the company because all the other divisions, the head of those divisions and those salespeople, everybody starts finding a reason why that volume shouldn't go to one particular division. So again, I go back to putting a proper business case and a change management, strategy together, because how are you going to, compensate for that? And so many times, let's call it the head of those companies, don't even know that's happening internally. But it is, believe me, I've heard loads of stories on the golf course from both sides of the fence. And, there's this internal politics and resistance that you're going to be swimming upstream, and it needs to be looked at because it is a serious problem out there.
Jean Lloyd, it's been a pleasure to have you here on the first of our 2 agreed over the Skype sessions. And I appreciate your input, and I think that this should lead up to a very interesting part 2. And thank you very much for your time with INKISH here today. Thank you.
Thank you for the time. And yeah, as I say, I probably get a bit too excited, but I'm passionate about the industry and I can't apologize for that.
You're most welcome.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Cheers.